Good evening, friends. Allow you a moment to take your seats. Welcome, friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, visitors from afar, Christina. We're here to celebrate the life of artist, friend, and mentor Chris Brookes. But before we begin tonight's program, I'm going to ask you to turn off your cell phones, or if you can't turn it off, to at least set it in airplane mode. The reason being, we are live streaming this event, and we need to... I'm glad I put this in here, just for you. We're live streaming this event, and we need all the bandwidth available at the hall here to make that possible and share this evening with our friends who couldn't join us. I'm sure you know there's lots of COVID going around, so we had a bunch of last-minute cancellations. I'm sure there's folks watching online. So if we could all do that, turn off our phones, that'd be great. My name's Patrick Foran. I'll be your MC. I'll try to be brief in my duties tonight. You know, it's a real challenge to capture a career in the arts that spans more than 50 years in just an hour, but we're going to try. Tonight, we will celebrate Chris and all of his wonderful accomplishments with performances and tributes from his colleagues in music, theater, from the radio and documentary community. We'll get into the announcement of the official Chris Brookes Award, and if we're lucky, a bit of mischief. For my part, I will introduce and welcome various performers and speakers to try and keep the evening moving along. But, you know, back to the main, how do you measure the impact of a life spent building and cultivating and creating and supporting the arts here in the city? How do we honor such a contribution? Surely we owe a sense of ourselves as Newfoundlanders to Chris. I know that I do. My parents are come back from a ways. They came home in 1995 with me and my two brothers. And soon after moving to town, I found myself here in the hall. And I happily spent my teenage years here surrounded by theater makers. A few years later, I met Robert Chafe and Jillian Kiley. And I can draw a line from the life I have and the career I have in the theater to the hall, to the community that gathers around it, to Chris, to the Mummers Troupe. Among our many distinguished guests tonight, I believe Lynn Lundy is here. Lynn, are you here? Lynn played an instrumental role in securing this building and keeping it alive in those early years. So delighted that you're here, Lynn. But we will begin tonight's program with something else that Chris loved, a bit of jazz. Among his many other accomplishments, Bill Brennan worked with Chris to produce the Jazz Portraits, a series of documentaries about the lives and musicians of 9 of Canada's jazz greats, who have been so instrumental in Canadian and international jazz history. We're talking about Guido Basso, Kenny Wheeler, Oliver Jones, Don Thompson, Paul Bley, and Michael Donato. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Mr. Bill Brennan. Thank you so much, Bill. A couple weeks ago, I had a phone call from Colin at Parks Canada. I had sent him a proposal, said, look, we want to honor Chris and his connection to Signal Hill and to Cabot Tower. We'd like to turn Cabot Tower into a radio station to play his work. And I was thrilled to get that call and to make that project happen. Rebecca Nolan, where are you? Rebecca? There she is in the back there. Rebecca was the one behind all of the machinery to make that happen, and we played Dave Brubeck with every broadcast because we knew that Chris loved jazz. I was trying to think about how to describe Chris to somebody, and I ended up with a list, so I'll give you that list. He was a friend, he was a mentor, an artist, a coffee aficionado, his cappuccinos were something else, a fellow cyclist, a rabble-rouser, actor, director, creator, doctor, known for making house calls, collaborator, convener, bringer together of like-minded souls, a sound designer, a listener, a good cook, an audio chef, a rower, but not your up-the-pond variety, more like around the harbor variety, a tender of chickens, a builder of chicken coops, a bestower of names to all things inanimate, and a goddamn public nuisance. A moment ago, I mentioned the Mummers Troupe. Well, my friend Charlie Tomlinson toured with the troupe with their Christmas show. He directed Chris, and I'm told that over many lunches and many coffees in Maddox Cove, Toronto, and St. John's, they had a couple of arguments. So please welcome to the podium here Charlie Tomlinson to read the Mummers' Creed.
Before I do that, I don't know. I thought I'd prepare something, and then I decided not, and I felt that was more appropriate for Brookes. It's 50-some years ago, I met Brookes down at the Ship, as it was then, and he encouraged me to take the racket, the theatre thing, seriously. Anyway, I am surprised to be so moved to be here today. Brookes and I like to have coffee. You said he's an aficionado. I would call him a snob. But we would argue about that. And the week before his death, we met, as we like to do. And we would talk about what we were going to talk about when he got back from Avignon. And because that's the kind of people we are, the conversation moved to what we would like said about each other at our funerals. And it's not about me, no, I just wanted, there's a Larkin poem about two horses. Anyway, that's okay. And Christopher said he wanted two things, and I'm going to do both of them for you. The second one is a bit of a surprise, it comes at the end. And the other one is he wanted somebody to read Benbow Davies, what he called the Mummers' Creed. In 1974, Benbow, well, I guess I did the first one. First one I did was in 75. And Brookes gave out this document for those of us that were new at the mummering. And it was basically a license, if you will, to be a nuisance, to go into people's houses. But the thing Benbow was, he was always, and I've paraphrased it over the years and got it wrong, but Benbow said the principal task of a mummer is to get into the fridge. And eat it all. And I do think that doing the Christmas play for those 3, 4, whatever years it was, remember, Ben, are you here? Ben Malone? Yeah. Remember that time when we had the car accident? Yeah. And we all got out of the car. We had a terrible, bad car accident. The constabulary were met by this group of mummers in full costume. Some of us wearing makeup that one wouldn't use anymore. There are photographs, and we all crave your indulgence. That's enough about me and enough about that. But it does, the other thing Christopher and I said that day when we met down to the Alt, and we agreed with each other, that, and I think it behooves me to say this, that Christopher really felt, and I agreed with him, that he had won the lottery when he met Christina. So without further ado, this is Bembo Davies' instructions to all of ye that would a mummering go. Just as time runs out for civilized man, time is running out for the theatre. Neither will survive without radical adjustments. It is no longer possible to politely impel a static audience to higher consciousness. What is required is a vibrant, responsive theatre form that will spur a community's active development of its own new order. A form that demands reaction, if necessary, out of self-preservation, in order to protect themselves from a howling mass of theatricians about to knock inspiration down their throats. How does one extract from a group of people the permission to drastically and irrevocably alter their lives? The theatre needs a license to attack fearlessly and imaginatively, to root out complacency and destroy old thought forms. Ladies and gentlemen, such license is provided by the traditional Newfoundland mummers' play. It is a must for any theatrician who is seeking to evoke genuine change. The process is easily initiated. When charming their way into a house, mummers must at all times justify their actions and presence in the name of tradition. From the moment one mummer foot has secured the doorway, however, all pretense of good behavior and humility can be dropped. None, ladies and gentlemen, none of the customary theatrical acting aesthetics need apply to the mummer. No. Concern for believability, economy of movement, logic, consistency, etc., is a hindrance to the real work at hand. More useful, perhaps, are the primal bodily functions and the introduction of parasites. Yes, nothing quite punctuates a dramatic moment like the itchy crotch. Only as a mummer, I say again, only as a mummer, is gross sexual humor not untamed manners, but quaint humor. There are two considerations in choosing a playing area: high mummer mobility and maximum inconvenience for the mummed. Now, priority must always be given to the second. Think nothing of having a couch moved all the way across the room and then changing your mind. Furniture is to be leapt from. Grandchildren make imposing weaponry. An evening gown can be a hiding place. Yes. When objects prove too substantial to move, full theatrical resonance is often achieved by a vigorous but unsuccessful attempt. Note that the audience is also to be considered as object. All right? If you are going to spend the next 5 minutes as a corpse, you may as well expire on a charming row of squiggling laps. Permanent maiming, while well within the mummer tradition, is, however, bad for community relations. But here it is, the other super objective. So, actor word, super objective. For the mama is to eat and drink as much as possible. Additional credits are given if one holds up the play's action while doing so. Under the guise of folk art, it is usually possible to scavenge all the best food at fancy parties. Every digestive tract has its limits. And it is not always possible to do justice to a particularly fine buffet. In such cases, a sock foot placed tastefully in the potato salad during the course of the action must be high art. All of this, of course, is in the name of tradition. That was the other thing that I said I would do.
Is there someone on your Christmas list that you have a hard time shopping for? Consider Resource Center for the Arts' new fundraising initiative, Pie in the Face. For the paltry sum of $200, I will pie anyone in this town. 753-4531, extension 314. Operators are standing by. You were promised mischief. I don't know, we did it. There's more coming. All right. I'm sorry about that, Reg. Anyway. And as a caution to our other presenters, if you go over time, there's more pie. Thank you, Charlie. You're a great sport. It was his idea, or Chris's idea, I should say. Our next guest is a celebrated playwright, proud son of the Goulds and my friend. Robert Chafe, his plays focus on narratives of and about Newfoundland and specifically of remarkable personal stories. One of his plays that premiered here, Oil and Water, tells the story of Lanier Phillips and his rescue by the people of St. Lawrence following the sinking of the USS Truxtun and Pollux. Chris had also explored this subject in his documentary, Survivor. These two artists would go on to work together closely as they created locative audio installations these past few years. And I'm sure there's a million ways that Chris's work impacted and shaped the artist that Robert has become. And I'm so glad that he's here to share those reflections with us. Please welcome to the stage Governor General Award-winning playwright, my friend, he's an awful golfer, Robert Chafe.
I'm really doubting I'm going to get through this without a pie. I had to write it down. Sorry, Charlie. Sorry, Chris. To my knowledge, Chris Brookes was only ever mad at me once. It was at an Artistic Fraud board meeting about a decade ago. Chris had been on our board for a good few years then, and we were in the throes of flux. Jill had just headed off to the National Arts Centre. Pat had just joined us, and I was the newly appointed artistic director. And as such, I was making some bids for change, maybe in retrospect just to put my stamp on the company, trying to solve problems, most of them that didn't exist. We had this funky thing happening because of our jokey name. The word fraud was landing some of our emails in junk folders in government. Our corporate sponsorship packages were ending up in trash bins. So I came to a board meeting with a brilliant idea, I thought, and the support of Jill and Pat, to change the name of the company to something a little more palatable to the powers that be. That idea probably would have passed that night if not for Chris, who, in a very rare, at least with us, show of fury, told us in no uncertain terms that he didn't sign on to direct a fucking company that made corporate comfort a priority. And that our company's little name was an example of the very moxie and humor that he admired in us and wanted to support. And there wasn't much to argue back about that. He was right in many ways, and his frustration with me was never reciprocated. It was, in fact, one of the most edifying reminders of what we do as a company, what we're supposed to be about, what we as a community of creators should be about, and what we all should and shouldn't be trying to do. Now, admittedly, I am a very unlikely person to deliver this ode to Chris Brookes, the theater creator. I was born in 1971. Around the same time Chris was starting the Mummers. I only came to know him, it's embarrassing, I only came to know him personally in the late 90s, long after he had formally moved from the stage to the airwaves. There was, of course, his beautiful play, Power of the Unemployed, co-created with Catherine Wellburn. I adored it, but as ignorant as I was at the time, I assumed he was moonlighting. I shamefully didn't know at the time the depth of Chris's education, experience, and work history, and so I was going around all impressed with this radio guy's dip back into playwriting. The political punch of it. Who knew this soft-spoken man had such fight in him? He might have a future at this, I thought. But such is the arguably unheralded full impact of Chris Brookes' on our work as a cultural community. Order of Canada, honorary doctorate, yes. There are not enough accolades for the man, but the man himself didn't toot his own horn. And too many, my age and younger, I'd wager, still have only half of the picture at best. There are many that do know, of course. Those that were there, many of you are here. Lynn. I rest my laurels tonight squarely as one who can speak with nothing but awe, complete awe and gratitude about Chris's theatrical legacy and his continued impact on me and the greater culture of this place. You all know this, that Chris and his colleagues emerged as artists into a city, province, and country that by all accounts didn't have much time for them. Newfoundland didn't have a fund to support homegrown art, didn't recognize its value. That value instead was placed squarely on work from away, curated culture by delivery, plays that told us how to be and thus how not to be, classics of British and American drama, bona fide, comfortable. Chris was part of a groundswell of young artists, all but babies, many of them, who bucked against this impossible weight. He formed and led the leaderless Mummers Troupe, a swinging door collective creation company of big personalities with bigger ambitions. Grounded in community-based storytelling and the unique, unsettling joy of the almost lost traditional Mummers play, the company crafted a series of works that spoke truth to power. They were public nuisances. They were excavating, interpreting, and sharing hard stories of what this place was about and what it knew itself to be, the people, places, and livelihoods, many of them under threat. Their art was about empowerment, finding and amplifying the voices of the voiceless, work defined by fight against that which is bigger, pervasive, and power and triumph of dignity and humor. Dark, biting, sarcastic, fearless humor. They were kids, and the choices these kids were making would have far-reaching and lasting impacts. They were doing nothing less than building the foundation of a contemporary Newfoundland culture, whether they knew it or not, and I suspect they did. And of course, that legacy wasn't fully intangible. In 1975, Chris and the Mummers bought the Union Hall they'd been renting for rehearsal and performances and turned it into the permanent home for art and culture in the downtown core. That leap of faith remains almost inconceivable to me. His relative young age, the age of his collaborators, the unsupportive provincial funding climate in which they were all still working, to buy a building, take on a mortgage, and the fundraising, the risk, but the reward? The National Theatre of Newfoundland? This place, I can scarcely put into words the debt I owe, we owe as a community, to Chris, Lynn, the Mummers, all of those who have stewarded this place ever since. This place is and has been my church. I have, like many of you, had so many life-defining moments as an artist and spectator in this room, this one tonight included. If the case could ever be made to rename this theater in someone's honor, I can think of no one more deserving than Chris Brookes. To some, that might be a bit controversial, but Chris never worried about a bit of controversy, did he? To my mind, Chris was always a bit of an age-defying artist. As a young man, when so many politely knock on doors and struggle to find their worth, Chris was kicking them down and declaring it. He possessed an uncanny confidence and gumption as a young artist. And as a senior artist, when most settled into their patterns or struggled with reinvention, he leaned into a boundless curiosity and a seemingly effortless innovation. He moved through his radio practice self-assuredly into mobile technology and located audio, collaborated as equals with countless younger artists across many disciplines, myself included. In the summer of 2000, hot on the heels of a brand new pandemic, Chris and I would finally get to work together creatively, along with Pat and a smattering of writers and performers, on a COVID pivot piece designed to finally get people out of the house and try to do it safely. We were still in a pandemic, so its process of creation was unique. I would drive my little car down into the Battery, park illegally while I ran up masked like a bandit to his front door, in gloved hands take a sterilized bag of recording equipment off his doorknob, jet it across the city and deposit on the doorknob of an actor, knock loudly and run away. Race home to join said actor and Chris on Zoom, where he'd talk the actor through the mechanics of turning on and off the recorder, capturing the monologue, hopefully, and then I'd race across town again to grab the bag, return it to Chris, where he would check it all out and hope that the actor had been able to follow the simple instructions. They all did, by the way. It was a bonkers way to make something, but it was admittedly a bonkers time, and Chris took it all in stride. The show that resulted was called The Other Side of This, a series of 7 audio monologues broadcasted at secret locations around the city and accessible to ticket buyers through short-range radio over their car stereo. It was successful enough that we all decided to make 2 more projects together, dipping into the smartphone-located audio side of things. In those projects, I got to once again experience Chris's brilliance as a storyteller and a sound artist, but also for the first time as a mentor. I don't know if he'd call it that. It always felt like a two-way street from him, but come on, I was like undeniably the beneficiary of knowledge transfer here. He was simply one of the most generous collaborators and gentle mentors I've ever had. I learned more than I realized I was learning, and I left a better artist for having worked with him. And I know I'm not alone in that experience. In retrospect, I think Chris joined the board of Artistic Fraud because he saw a little of himself in us, and I mean a little. The cheeky name, the fact that we wrapped this building in a big bed sheet in 1997 to promote a show, the fact that we emblazoned on our posters for the same play a snotty phrase, the show Canada Council said couldn't be done, all because we got turned down for a grant. Friggin' snots, upstarts, nuisances in our own very small way. We were bucking against something too, and I think Chris saw that and he liked that. But things were inarguably way easy for us because of him, though he'd never say that. Things were made possible for us because of what he'd done, though he'd never say that. He was a hero. We probably didn't tell him that enough. We definitely didn't tell him that enough. He sat on our board for almost 20 years. He only tried to quit once. After a meeting when a spreadsheet told us that we needed some fund development and an idea was floated of board expansion, inviting some folks with money connections, and Chris tried to self-edit out, and I wouldn't let him. If such a board were come to pass, I told him, it would more than ever need a voice like his to keep us on the level, to remind us who we are, what we should be doing. And he couldn't argue me on that. He was my friend, my mentor, my collaborator, my inspiration, my sober second thought, and my hero. And I will miss him very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And I'm sorry I said you're a bad golfer. I know you've been working on it. So we've had some jazz. We've had some kind words from the theater community a little bit of pie stuff too. But as we all know, Chris was an international award-winning documentary maker. I mean, they're right there. And he had collaborators all over the globe. A good few of them are here tonight. A good few of them barmped up a storm in the harbor this afternoon. You could tell they're the ones with the big smiles when they, before they put their masks on. And one of those colleagues is Paolo Pietropalo, who created several pieces with Chris. And I now invite Paolo to bring a tribute from Chris's radio family.
Thank you, Pat. Chris was very dear to me, as he was to so many. And I'm here to tell you how dear he was to those in the audio world. I think of Chris every day. One of the reasons that I think of Chris every day is that I have chickens because of Chris. You probably know that Chris could be very persuasive. I think it was a phone call in spring 2021, and he just started telling me about how great chickens are. And before you know it, my whole family was into the idea of having chickens. And so now every day when I go to let the chickens out, I think of Chris. And when I put the chickens to bed, I think of Chris. And it was just always so nice when I was out there dealing with my chickens to know that I wasn't in this chicken husbandry thing alone, that far away on the other coast, because I live in Vancouver, there was somebody else who was doing the same thing. We were so lucky to work together. I was so lucky to work with Chris and to call him my mentor and my friend. And I used to call him up, and we'd have these great conversations from 4.5 hours time difference away. And we had nicknames for each other. We had these really nerdy nicknames for each other. Myself and our dear friend Joey Taylor, and colleague Joey Taylor, who's here as well. And Joey, where are you? There he is up there. And Chris, there were 3 of us, and we named ourselves after, of course, the 3 bones of the middle ear, because we were making audio documentaries. And so I was Malleus, and Chris was Incus, and Joey was Stapes. And Chris would always sign his emails to me, Inky. That was what he said, Inky. I always loved getting emails from Inky. Sometimes I would sign them back Mally, short for Malleus, which is really not as nice a nickname as Inky, let's face it. But my wife Natasha is Sri Lankan, and in Sinhalese, Malli means little brother. So in a way, it was appropriate. And you know, whether you think of him as an elder brother or an uncle or father to so many across the audio world, that's what he was. And every time you spoke to Chris, you could hear the twinkle in his eye, right? You know? That was who he was. He always had that twinkle in his eye, whether it was because he was so excited about something, enthusiastic about whatever it was, the latest thing he was into, or he had an idea for something really playful or really mischievous. He was an audio trickster, and he had this ability to pull you in. You know, you'd start listening to one of his pieces, and before you knew it, you'd be completely wrapped up in it, and by the end of it, you'd be a changed person. Here in St. John's, you all know what a local treasure Chris was. But around the world, and I mean around the world, he was a legend. He was a wizard. He was a radio guru who was revered worldwide. I love the way one of our mutual friends put it, a Danish radio producer named Rikke Hohn. Rikke says, "Some people are lighthouses. They are far away across the ocean. And although you may not see them often, you know they are there, making the world bigger." Chris was like that for so many people. Now, to give you an idea of just what he meant to so many people, we asked folks around the world to send in their messages to be shared here tonight. And so you're going to hear some of those right now. You'll also hear some excerpts from Chris's work, so it's going to be for 15 minutes. For the next 15 minutes, let's all listen together. Chris would have loved that, us sitting here listening together. So here is our love letter from around the world of audio to our dear Chris.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Jiří Slavičinský. I'm in Prague.
I'm Kathy, and I live in Wendover.
I'm David Swatling from Amsterdam.
I'm Lorelei Harris from Dublin.
I'm Neil Sandell in Nice, France.
Robin Revlich in Sydney.
John Miller, and I'm in Ithaca, New York.
It's Kasia Michalak from Poland.
Greg Kelly, and I live in Oakville, Ontario.
This is Rebecca Nolan in St. John's, Newfoundland.
I'm Joey Taylor in Toronto.
Julie Shapiro from Arlington, Massachusetts.
Patrick Foran in St. John's.
Phil Smith from Brighton in the UK.
I'm Mike Rossiter.
Angela Antle, here in St. John's, Newfoundland.
This is Paolo Pietropaulo. I live in Vancouver.
Alan Hall in southeast London, England.
I am Ljubo Pauzin from Croatia.
Hi, I'm Annie McEwen. I live in Brooklyn.
This is Diarmuid McIntyre in Kilfinnan.
I'm Sean Street from Liverpool, England.
This is Eleanor in London.
Here's a message for Chris somewhere up there on Signal Hill from David Zane Marowitz somewhere in Poland. We want you to hear a snippet from our CBC doc about you.
This is Chris's domain. It's kind of like living inside his brain.
Whoops. This terrific line is covered by a microphone blip. Should we just cut it as most radio makers would, or keep it in as Chris might do? Can you hear me? Can you hear anything?
Hey, is this thing plugged in?
Next message.
We, audio storytellers, are a tribe of lonely people. From time to time, we need to meet a shaman, a master, to be motivated to keep going, a point of reference in the form of a person. Chris was one such person.
Ladies and gentlemen. At this time. Will you try and listen to the sound?
Over your loudspeakers.
Can you hear the background noises?
I think you could hear the actual sound.
Although I first met Chris at Radio Netherlands, my fondest memories are the time we spent together on the island of Hvar during the pre-Marowitz festivals, just hanging out at a terrace cafe with espresso and gelato.
We're in his dory, rowing around St. John's Harbor, and it's one of those rare sunny days.
One Christmas, we were mummering, and nothing seemed to be working. The house parties were just not into it. We were silent in the van as we drove, and then on the radio, "I'll have a blue Christmas without you." We all started to sing.
I thought about Chris every time I heard the foghorn.
But it didn't matter.
And it was just kind of a nice little feeling to just kind of know he was out there in the Battery somewhere, wrangling chickens or cutting tape or fighting City Hall or something. But
the sight of him, possibly the first time I met him, on a road bike, like an old vintage road bike, and I have this kind of image of him swinging his leg over the frames.
I loved bumping into Chris at the coffee shop. He was often there on his computer, working on the next magic thing, and he always had this cool elegance about him. He had silver bracelets on his wrist and turtleneck tucked into jeans and this felt hat on his head, and it was so nice to see him.
I always loved connecting with Chris on the phone about whatever projects we were working on, or just to catch up. I'd call him up, and he'd say, oh, hello, West Coast office. This is the East Coast office. How are you? And we get to talking, and he'd tell me about what the seagulls were doing in the harbor, and you could always hear the twinkle in his eye. That's one of the many, many things I love about Chris.
I remember if you were trying to plan a call with Chris, once you'd figured out the time, there'd always be this little back and forth where he would ask, Alexander Graham Bell or Steve Jobs? And I always enjoyed that.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Could I ask you to do me a quick favor with that telephone for 30 seconds?
Yeah, what's that?
Could you just hold the phone up in the air so I can record the sound at that location?
What are you trying to do?
I want to record the sound that comes through that telephone. If you could just hold the phone up in the air for 20, 30 seconds, it would be fine.
Okay.
All right, where exactly is this location?
It's in London.
Yeah, but it's a pay box. Where is it?
It's in Paddington.
Lovely. Just hold it up in the air, would you? 20 seconds. Thank you.
Please keep to the left when walking through the station. Keep your personal belongings and luggage close to the door. Thank you.
All right.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Next message.
I feel we are in a poorer place for Chris's absence. He was a magician who conjured up interior worlds through acts of love, anger, and remorse. But more than this, he was a man with a sense of place and history who walked his earth with a sureness and elegance that called the past and the future into the present, which, in the words of the English poet Alice Oswald, is the story of the falling rain that rises to the light and falls again.
I don't know how to squash someone who is so big into such a flicker of time. I used to bump into Chris at festivals. He was always the person I looked forward to seeing the most.
When Chris was in your corner, you felt like you could conquer the world.
As a very young producer, he was one of the first radio people that I met in our office in London, and I was a little bit dazzled and in awe. And I just remember how warm, mischievous, funny and welcoming he was, and how he made me realise what a big family the radio world was.
Chris embodied the independent audio community like no other.
Chris was really influential, important part of this family of radio makers.
He was in so many ways local, but also global. He was an empathetic, engaging storyteller, an inspiring member of the international feature community.
Chris meant so much to me professionally, as a mentor and collaborator. It always felt like we were hearing the world we wanted to build through his wondrous ears. That wonder is a gift I take from him.
He just used to gladden my heart. I don't know why that's the right way of saying it, but it is. He gladdened my heart with his curiosity and his creativity.
I'm especially grateful to him for making us realize that radio has its own mythology. It has its Marconi god and the creative moment, the transmission of a radio wave across the Atlantic. It was Chris who said that the essence of radio is not to inform, but to evoke. We should always remember that. I would like to dedicate the sound of the letter S in Morse alphabet to Chris.
When you listen to a piece by Chris Brookes, it's whole cloth. And if you were to try and pull it apart at the seams, you would see just how interlocked everything is. I mean, that was his genius.
I did a story with Chris in 2004, 2005 called A Map of the Sea. And Chris had ideas right away that I didn't quite understand, and he began his story by sticking his microphone out the window to listen to something extremely familiar to him. And the story that grew out of it was just beautiful and layered and complex, and I will never forget it.
I make a lot of recordings, like this one. This is the sound of fog rolling into the harbor past my house. When I'm recording, it's the sound of the present. I put the tape on a shelf, and when I play it back, days or weeks or years later, of course, it's become the sound of the past. A little spool of memory, measuring the gap between then and now. And I feel like there's something sad about the gap, but I don't know why. It's just things changing. Of course, this isn't really the sound of fog. Fog is something you can't hear on the radio. This is a foghorn, a thing that evolved entirely because of fog. So it's kind of like the voice of fog.
A memory, Chris. We're sitting drinking coffee in your house at the Outer Battery under Marconi's Hill on a June morning, talking about sound as the mist rolled in through the Narrows and the physical world dematerialized before our eyes, and the sirens started playing their fog music. It's that extraordinary juice that happens sometimes about tones or timbres of sound and how they strike the ear, you said. It's about how they juxtapose against another piece of acoustic energy. We sat and listened to the audible geography of St. John's Harbour. It's not about the words, you said. It's about the force fields between the words.
Chris was my mentor, he was my teacher. And I just loved him so much. And
he believed in me, he celebrated me, he pushed what I could create and never, ever lost sight of me as a human being.
Chris has been my dearest friend.
Whatever decision I made, Chris noticed, and I'd get a one-line email, two-line email, just saying that's the way to go, and it meant the world to me, and it still does.
He truly and deeply cared for other people, for people he worked with, for people he interviewed.
And he was tremendously kind. He was just, his baseline seemed to be kindness. There was something a little bit magical and a bit mysterious and a bit mischievous about him, and I really loved that. And I really hate him being a was. This is the first time I've made him that, really, I think, doing this. Because I think up till now I have just thought I'd still bump into him.
And I miss him.
I will miss Chris a lot.
I will miss him as long as I live.
And I miss him.
Chris Brookes, well, a beautiful voice, a beautiful mind, a beautiful maker, a beautiful moustache, a beautiful glint in his eye, and such a way with words.
And when the chaos of creation and festival making and collaboration or whatever we were working on would end, there would always be a mail a little while later saying, "It's a mawsy day in St. John's. How are you? How are you?"
Thanks for everything, Chris.
Miss you, Chris.
And Chris, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Paolo. That was just beautiful. And I guess this is a moment to remind you all, if you haven't heard it, there is also a documentary that was aired on CBC Ideas, I believe, on Friday. Help me if I get the name wrong. The maker of it is David Merowitz. You can listen to it on the CBC app, or I'm sure it'll play on the waves again soon. But it's just it's required listening. Thank you again, Paolo. I kind of don't want to say. But I do, a friend of mine wants to share a personal anecdote. Switching over to theater again for a moment. Jillian, would you come up here and share that wonderful story that you had mentioned to me? Jillian Kiley, everyone.
Hi, everybody. What an honor it is to be here. Chris was our North Star. I just want to tell you a story. I met Chris when I was actually very young. I was only 13 or 14. I'm out.
Ball with me. Now, I hope he'll give satisfaction to you all. And if you'd like to see him, I'll bring him in.
Yes, we want to see him.
Once he was alive, but now he's dead. Sure, he's nothing but an horse's head. Well, stand around and make your obedience known to the audience. Come on, Paul, go on. Now that's not all this fine horse can do. Ball is capable of answering questions too. Do anybody have any questions for old Ball?
Anyone at all?
Anyone at all? A question for the Ball. How about you, Mr. Snowy? Do you have a question? Oh, I hear something coming in over the lines. Hang on. We've got a shoe phone. Hello? Oh, hey. Hello? What are we doing here? Oh, hang on. That's a good question. Mr. Snowy was thinking the same thing, weren't you? Well, what are we doing here? A person dead. A person dead. Is there a doctor to be found to cure a dead man of his deadly wound? £5 for a doctor.
Oh, my son, I'm not wrong for that.
£10 for a doctor.
Why, you wouldn't get a bandage at the Chinway for that price. I'm not going to come for that.
£15 for a doctor.
Do you know what the price of bacon is these days? I'm not going to come for that.
How much do you want then?
Well, £25 is my fee, but you lot clearly needing a bit of help. I'll throw off a farthing. So, £24, 19 shillings, 11 pence, and a halfpenny.
So,
plus tax and gratuity. Now, it doesn't go about like your half-free, rafty sham younger doctors up at the Health Sciences Center, neither kills nor cures. That goes about for the good of the country. Rather kill than cure.
What can you cure?
What can I cure? Here, my duck, can you hold my bag? Not that bag, my dear, that bag. I can cure the nits, the fits, the palsy, and and the gout. And if the devil is in a man, I can root him out. And if the devil wants the number for another man, I can also hook him up with that person too, if he wishes.
Enough of that. That's not what you're here for.
What is the matter here?
A person's dead.
A person dead? Well, where's meat bag? Oh, my ducky, thank you very much. Why, this person isn't dead. I thought she was just having a great time and just like really enjoying the party tonight.
Not there. Over here.
Oh, well, what this person needs? Some of my homemade remedies I just happen to have brought with me in my doctor's bag. I have a bit of hare's grease and a bit of mare's grease. Or is it hare's grease and mare's grease? It's the same thing. I have the wig of a weasel. Sir, I think that could do very well.
Oh, thank you.
I also have the wool of a frog. And most importantly, I have 24 ounces of September fog. It now comes in lavender. That reminds me, is there a young person in the company who'd like to buy a little of my Inca Tink, wonderful white drops of delight?
Enough of that. That's not what you're here for.
Oh, well, you never knew a doctor to take a short job in hand that he always makes a long one out of, did you? What? This person is more than just a man. He was a mummer. He was a mummer king.
I thought you said he was a doctor.
Oh, well, he's a Dr. King Mummer. He's following Andrew Fury's plan for world domination. Now, how do we know that he was a king? Best thing we have to do is consult the Mummer's medical Bible. I just happen to have a copy of it with me here. Let me look up what it says. This will tell us all. It says, get a haircut and get a real job. Wait a second, it's upside down. It says, see footnote. Footnote, it says the best answer is to ask Anita. Anita Best.
Joy, love, health, and peace to all here in this place. By your leave we will sing concerning our King. Our King is well dressed in silks of the best, in ribbons so rare, no king can compare. We have traveled many miles over hedges and skies.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Myself and Old Ball would like to welcome Nicole Russo down to introduce the Chris Brookes Memorial Award.
Hi, everybody. So like Jill said, my name is Nicole Russo, and I am the current artistic animateur for Resource Center for the Arts Theatre Company. And I'm truly honored to be here with you tonight to make this announcement in the building that holds such an important place in the history of live performance in our province, alongside the immense cultural contribution of the Mummers Troupe, led by Chris Brookes, who first animated this incredible space. It's now close to 51 years ago that this organization was founded as Resource Foundation for the Arts on November 21st, 1972. A few short years later, with support from CPAC and looking for a venue for East End Story, he found this place where we are gathered that has come to be affectionately known as the Hall. Now, his words about the discovery are better than mine. I have one too. So I'm just gonna quickly let Chris tell you about it. He says, in 1975, the St. John's branch of the Community Planning Association of Canada, CPAC, commissioned us to produce a play about neighborhood development in the downtown east end of the city. It was clear that the play would have to be performed in the downtown area, something that had hardly been done since the early 1950s. The downtown east end had once been at the heart of the city's arts and cultural activity. Now even the nearest cinema was 10 miles away. I searched the neighborhood for a likely performance space and encountered the Longshoremen's Protective Union, LSPU Hall. Belonging to the oldest surviving union in Newfoundland, the hall in 1975 housed only occasional union meetings and the LSPU office. It was a beautiful little theater space, centrally located, acoustically excellent, and seating about 150. Best of all, as a union hall, it had none of the sanctimoniousness associated with church and school auditoria downtown. I immediately fell in love with it. The union allowed us to rent the upstairs space for rehearsals and performance for $5 a day. And we started rehearsal, I know, for East End Story in early June. Chris was here with us last year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the RFA and returned the sign that hangs near the bar downstairs. Maybe you saw it on your way up. It says, "Side loaders means unemployment," which has become sort of an unofficial motto around here that affirms our commitment to the community in which this organization was born and the vision of Chris Brookes, who believed in theater as a vehicle for social change. It is in that spirit that Ruth Lawrence, Helen Peters, Henry Tremblay, and Christina Smith, we worked together to create an award to honor this journey as it is expressed in the arts community today. On behalf of the board and staff at RCA, and Helen and Henry and Ruth and Christina, I am proud to announce the establishment of the Chris Brookes Memorial Award. The Chris Brookes Memorial Award, or CBMA, is a $2,000 award that will be presented annually by RCA Theatre Company for a project in development or production in the following calendar year. Seed funding for the Chris Brookes Memorial Award was provided by Henry and Helen Peters to establish a living legacy to honor the value and importance of Brookes' pioneering contributions to the performing arts in Newfoundland and Labrador, across the country, and around the world. Helen and Chris were colleagues, and this award is testament to his ongoing contribution to the arts community, with Helen and friends as inaugural donors. This award aims to support theater creation in all its forms: writing, performance, design and construction, direction, projection, and more. Its intention is to support work that expands the personal creative journey of the candidate. The award is open to all theater artists living and working in Newfoundland and Labrador at the time of submission, regardless of citizenship, with a project intended for public presentation in Newfoundland and Labrador. Chris understood the power of theater to engage, unify, and empower people and communities. The driving purpose behind his theater work was to effect positive change in the world. The theatrical work he created was for, about, and supportive of the communities they reflected. This award aims to support these values as well and encourage artists who wish to grow their theater practice and leadership talents. If you would like to support the Chris Brookes Award, you can do it in one of two ways. You can donate by check, and if you do that, please indicate if you're sending to us that that is what it's for. Or if you'd like to donate online, we've set up a Canada Helps page to support the award. You can contact us here at the hall anytime if you want the link directly, or you can search it through our profile on Canada Helps, which is under Resource Centre for the Arts. If you'd like to make a donation this evening, our General Manager, Suzanne Mullett, who I think, are you up there in the balcony, Suzanne? There she is, yes. She can receive them on behalf of the fund, or I think there's a box at the box office as well. Sincere thanks to Henry and Helen Peters, Ruth Lawrence, and Christina Smith for all you did to get us here. Details about the award and the process by which to apply will be available on our website really very soon. Thank you, everyone. It's been such a beautiful night.
We better see lots of donations, that's all I'm saying. And now, it's been such a special evening. I now invite Christina. Would you like to come up and say a few words?
Thank you. There are so many people to thank, I can't even begin. The first one I want to thank is Pat, because Pat is the one who really put this all together. And apart from saying thank you to everybody, I'm going to leave the rest of the thanks to Pat. So, I'm not sure I'm going to get through this, so I'm going to invite Bernadine Stapleton to join me on stage. And those of you who know Chris's work will know that Bernadine has been my voice before, if you've listened to songs my mother taught me. So if I can't get through this, Bernadine is going to take over. Bernadine has just been, she's one of 4 nominees for the Canada's most prestigious award. Canada's most prestigious award, the Simonovich Award. So anyways, I've just written this. I can't speak it off the cuff, so I'm just gonna read it. And it's about me and Chris. It's hard to say what makes a relationship work. Chris often said to me that he'd never met anyone like me, and this always puzzled me, as I always considered that Chris was the one-off, and I was much more the garden variety, right? He said it was because I was WYSIWYG, which I understand in computer terms means what you see is what you get. But surely that can't make me unique. And he couldn't really explain further than that, apart from mentioning something that I'd said or done. I think now, though, I've discovered what made our particular alchemy work. And I believe it is that our inner child implicitly recognized, understood, and cherished the inner child of the other. I think that was our secret wavelength. It went direct to the heart. We were happy, and we knew we were happy. We loved each other without measure, and we knew it. We were the 2 luckiest people on the planet, and we told each other that every day. September 30th was our anniversary. I went back to Curlews Harbor. Some of you will know that's a special place for us. We had our first real date there on the last weekend in September, picking partridge berries in 1993. 7 years later, on the same weekend, some of you came with us on the 40-minute hike through the woods from New Bonaventure. And Betty Fitzgerald, the truly amazing mayor of Bonavista, joined us in holy matrimony. Chris and I wrote poetry to each other. His was better than mine, but with your indulgence, I'm going to read my last one to Chris. It is our anniversary. I am in Trinity, wakeful again in the first bed we ever shared. The lighthouse beam still flashes through the window, silently marking time on the wall as it did 30 years past above our heedless heads. The foghorn echoes, you would have recorded it. How is it that you could slip so suddenly from present tense to conditional? The sunset was beautiful. You would have loved it. You would have loved the moonrise. You would have loved the little Rodney on her collar, mirrored in a sea as still as glass. You would have smiled to see a couple holding hands across the table. Now I am like our old cat, Mike, who, after the dog died, prowled through the house crying out, checking all the old places. And I wonder if I go to Curly's Harbor, will my heart find you? And I wonder, is there any signal that could have kept you from the rocks? Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for sharing in this. Thank you to the LSPU Hall and all the wonderful people that work here that made this possible tonight for volunteering and donating this space to this effort. And I was joking, or not joking earlier when I said I hope that there will be a lot of donations to the award. I want to see a lot of donations now. Don't disappoint me. Thank you to all of our presenters, to Bill, to Paolo, to Robert, to everyone who, to Charlie, to the Pie, to the whole Jillian, the Mummers. God love you all. I will point out again, Suzanne is here to receive your donation. One last thank you is to my friend Delph, who organized the wonderful Harbor Symphony this afternoon. And recorded it. Lucas, hit play. Thank you.